I think you've noticed the last few blogs have been probably geared a little bit more towards the unfaithful, because I really like to help them not make some of the mistakes that I made. I would have loved to have had this medium early on. And so if this is one of the first blogs, or if you've only seen a couple, I hope and I pray and I implore you to dive into these blogs head first, because there's a lot that you can learn. If anything, the ground floor is, don't do what some of us did early on. That will save your life right there. So today, I want to tell you about a story that changed my whole approach to God and life and theology. If you don't subscribe to a Christian worldview or a faith perspective, today's going to be a little bit faithy, if you will. It's going to have a little bent to it. And so I hope that you'll still listen. But if not, I totally respect that. But I just want to give that disclaimer, because I know there's a lot of you that don't come from a faith perspective, but still get a lot out of these blogs. And I'm so grateful that you're on here. And I don't want you to be offended or feel ostracized, but this blog is going to have a little bit of a bent to it. And so one of the struggles for me, quite honestly, was feeling like I was worthless after my affairs. I felt like, if you've watched enough of my blogs, you know I was suicidal. The only reason I didn't, to this day I'm convinced, was because I had my 3 kids at the time. At the time of disclosure, they were 5 and 4 and 6 weeks old. And so that was the only reason in my mind, besides the grace of God, that I didn't just end it all. And I was at an EMS a year after we went to an EMS. So Rick had Samantha and I come back and be a mentor, which we do at our EMS weekends. We have people come back and be mentors who have gone through it. So while you're at the weekend, you get to hear from people and learn from their story and hear the nitty-gritty to where they're at now. And some people are 2, 3, 4, 10 years out. But I was in this weekend and this guy was talking and he said, "Do you feel like a disappointment to God?" And I said, "Of course. I'm a disappointment to myself. Of course I'm a disappointment to God." And he looked me right in the eye in front of all these people and he said, "Samuel, to disappoint God, you have to shock God. You can't catch God off guard. God knew what he was getting when he opened up your eyes. You can't shock him. You can't catch him off guard. You can't disappoint him. He is all-knowing." I was stunned. I'll never forget. I was writing and I started to cry, and it was this awkward moment because the mentor couple is in the back and I'm having this come to Jesus moment, and people are like, and I think Rick probably was like, "Hey, can you tone it down a little bit? Look like you're further along than you are." And so, but I had this life-changing moment where I realized, wait a minute, God is not so much like our earthly father that I can catch him off guard. He chose me, he opened up my eyes, he saved me, even though he knew what I was capable of doing. Even though he knew I was going to do what I did, he still saved me and gave me life and still was investing in me. And it really shattered this illusion that I had built up, that I was a disappointment to God, I was worthless, there was no hope for me, I was never going to do anything meaningful again. And I can't say to you without a apparent large degree of emotion what it means when people say to me at EMS weekends, they'll meet me and say, "Your blogs have saved me," or I get emails or different things like that. I've even had people stop me in stores or whatever and go, "Hey, I got to tell you," it means more to me than I can describe. The fact that God would still have meaning for me and purpose for me in light of how I have devastated so many people and let so many people down and completely shattered my life, I'm amazed at that. I was convinced that I was a disappointment, that I was a stepchild, I had disqualified myself, and that I was just a bastard, quite frankly. And it really radically changed my life. And then if you get into the Bible, there's some great truths here, and I'm just going to give you one quick one that really struck me that same weekend. Listen to the way the New Testament starts. Matthew chapter 1, verse 1 says, "The record of the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham." On its face, it's pretty amazing because the New Testament starts with the name of Jesus being called the son of David. And we know David. David was not just an adulterer, but David was a murderer at some level. And the fact that God would not be ashamed of David and he would allow the New Testament to start with Jesus being addressed as the son of David. And it goes, obviously we understand the lineage of Jesus and being this, from the seed of David and Abraham. And it was a prophecy. Jesus was the fulfillment of a prophecy. I mean, think about it. Think about the fact that God was not ashamed of David. Yes, he was grieved, and we can grieve God. Don't get me wrong. But the fact that God would allow the New Testament to start with Jesus being called the son of David, who was an adulterer, think about that. If you're an unfaithful today, God's not done with you. Even if you're done with yourself, God's not done with you. And I know that kind of pisses you off, betrayed, to know that God's not done with your worthless son of you-know-what, but he's not. He's not done with you, and he's not done with the unfaithful spouse. So if you're an unfaithful, and if you're watching here today, and you're like me, you feel worthless. Maybe you are a pastor, or maybe you were in a role like I was, and you kind of go, man, how could God ever use me again? Rick said, you know what, Samuel? I think God can finally start to use you because you know what it's like to fail. Now you're humble. Now you're teachable. Now you're not so self-absorbed. Now you're finally valuable to the Lord to be able to use because you're not looking to get all the credit. And I'll tell you, it's the same truth today, is that God's not done with you. It is a time for you to be brave. It's a time for you to own what you've done, to embrace the pain that you have caused other people. The greatest sign of maturity, in my opinion, is for you to own it, not get defensive, and allow God to do what he needs to do in you and in your spouse. But make no mistake about it. God is not done with you. God is not ashamed of you. You haven't shocked God. You haven't disappointed him. You've grieved him. And grieving God is worse than shocking him. But you can't shock him. So you've grieved him. And so you're going to have to do some repair work to your relationship with the Lord as well as to your relationship with your spouse. But don't you for a moment think that God is done with you. I guarantee you he's not.